Welcome back to the Chips and Salsa Show. My name is Martin Gonzalez. With me to my left, Alice Lara and George Ortiz. How you guys doing?
Hola.
Hola.
It's wonderful to be a part of this segment with you all. We have a special guest for you, General Mick Mcguire. How are you, sir?
I'm great.
Welcome
Martin.
to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, and thanks Alice and George for hosting me into Chips and Salsa. It's a great show.
Oh, you're kind to say. Well, we'd like to get right into it, based on the time that we have. One of the questions I want to ask you, General Mick, is what made you decide to run for office, and specifically U.S. Senate?
Yeah. Well, thanks for that question. As you mentioned, I did, out of, good luck, timing, and some clerical errors, I retired as a two-star general from the Air Force, and I retired just about 1 year ago today, April 10th.
Thank you for your service to our
you bet,
country.
you bet.
Thank
After
you.
nearly
Appreciate it.
38 years, and was the commanding general of the Guard here. And the question I get asked most often is, why would a guy who's happily married, 35 years, beautiful wife, 3 daughters, a granddaughter, and a grandson, consider running to be the 51st vote in the U.S. Senate, especially when you leave an institution like the U.S. military? And I tell them, the last straw is no more heavy than the rest. It's just the last straw. And for me, the last straw occurred on January 8th. 2021. I was asked on that day, Martin, to send 6% of the Guard in the state of Arizona, from the state of Arizona to D.C., fully armed with live ammunition and full battle rattle to D.C. to police the citizens we're sworn to protect
Now,
and defend.
the president asked you to do that?
No.
Who asked
Well,
you?
I was asked by the Secretary of Defense to do that. Myself, the other colleagues from the other states, territories, and the district. General Milley and the members of the Joint Chiefs, as well as the Secretary, asked me this, and I said, listen, this is a heavy political lift. We're a nation of laws. Did President Trump invoke the Insurrection Act? The answer was no. I asked, did President Trump declare an emergency for civil unrest or a riot? Mind you, this is 48 hours after the incident and the misconduct on the 6th. The answer again was no. And I asked, did President Trump declare this group a terrorist organization? The answer is no. I said, well, I've spent 38 years in uniform following legal, moral, ethical orders, but those are not co-equal problems. The supreme law of the land is the United States Constitution. Every officer takes an oath to support and defend it. But what you're asking me to do isn't legal. I can't judge the morality or efficacy. Therefore, I can't deploy anybody to D.C. Unfortunately, my colleagues from the 50 states, 3 territories, and the District of Columbia, the other 53, sent 26,000 soldiers fully armed in full battle rattle into D.C. without proper legal authority, in what is tantamount to a coup or an invasion. Now, I went home that night and I told my wife, the Lord has put us at a strange point in U.S. history. I'm watching, I believe Nancy Pelosi asked the acting Secretary of Defense to do something that was out of his authority as an unelected bureaucrat, and we're moving an entire corps of soldiers into a city without any legal authority, and the media is acting like a bunch of clapping seals.
Well, doesn't it seem ironic then, General Mick, that yet, despite all that information that you provided, that valuable information that doesn't necessarily get out to the public,
Right.
So how is it that the left is still trying to keep Trump tied down legally, and they're trying to prevent him from ever coming back to office, or they're still trying to, put, in other words, put him through the coals?
Yeah, I think to contextualize it, I'm wearing the cloth of the nation on January 6th. So you think about the events leading up to January 6th, the actual incident, and now I'm talking about 48 hours later, after it's all over. Mm-hmm. We're going to send 26,000 soldiers, and we did it. Arizona was the only state that didn't participate. I said no. I went home that night and I told my wife that I cannot participate in this. I refused the order. I said it's not legal. I knew it when I did that my career militarily was over. And she said, I've never seen anything like this. I said, I've spent 38 years in uniform trying to protect this republic, and it's coming apart at the seams. And she said, what are you going to do about it? I said, I'm going to run for the U.S. Senate. She said, you've never run for dog catcher. But to make it very clear to your question about the event, leading up to the event, it is my understanding, although I wasn't part of these conversations, that President Trump had asked for up to 10,000 guardsmen to help augment law enforcement under their mutual aid agreements. At the time of the incident, they didn't make those requests. And subsequent to the incident, we ended up surrounding the entire Capitol with 3 layers of concertina wire fencing and a 7-mile shoulder-to-shoulder ring of armed soldiers around the U.S. Capitol, protecting the elected officials from the constituents that put them there. And I tell people we have an over 300-year history of rebuffing the idea of using the military to police us. Look no further than Shays' Rebellion or the Boston Massacre. And the message of hope for your listeners is this. You know, they say, what can one person do in the U.S. Senate? If we elect Mick Mcguire to send Mark Kelly back to space, what can one person do? And the answer is this. I say no, Martin, on that day. On February 4th, less than a month later, the new Secretary of Defense is in there. Biden has been sworn in on the 20th. He asked us to extend the mission through the June 1st. I tell him it's a moot point for Arizona. We never deployed. Of my 53 colleagues, 42 of them come up voice and say, Mick's right, we're recalling our troops. This mission lacks proper legal authority. So that's what the power of one person standing against evil can do.
Do you have a question? Because I'm a bit overwhelmed by the excellent answer that we just got.
You know,
I'm like thinking, okay, let me wrap my brain around this for a second before I ask you the next question.
Yeah.
Here's the thing that you're saying, you're telling this story, and how many people know about this? How, you know, I'm hoping that anybody that's watching and hearing this, please give that message to your friends and family. Because even if you may have heard it, you've forgotten about it, and it needs to be out there.
Right.
Because there's still people in prison for this January 6th thing.
Yeah, I mean that all of that is absolute abridgment of their constitutional rights. Every citizen is afforded 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendment rights. If there's an allegation of criminal misconduct, the government needs to bring forward charges and prefer them charges with an expedient trial. If not, if they cannot prefer charges, they need to be released. There's no gray area there. This is not a country that can survive if we walk away from the rule of law. And the reason that I'm running is because I wore the cloth of the nation apolitical. I served for Democratic presidents. I served for Republican presidents. But here's the truth. We have no higher emotional IQ than any other nation on earth. And if left to natural law and left to divide and allow tyranny of the majority to prevail, it's not a matter of if, but when this republic comes apart at the seams. And I think it's worth saving. If I really believe this is the greatest country in the history of the world, you're right. I'm putting my wife and daughters and grandkids through a very excruciating and unfortunate ordeal because the left doesn't treat you well. But it's worth saving.
And you know, with the Easter coming up this weekend, I think about that. And if anybody that's out there and you're saying, oh, you know, there's nothing I can do. Well, there's somebody who really did a lot for you. So just keep thinking about that. I want to ask you.
True. He made the ultimate sacrifice.
Exactly. I want to ask you. So I was watching another political program, and they had some polling done. And in fair disclosure, we are all Republicans here. George and I used to be former Democrats, but we're Republicans. So we interview all the Republican candidates. If you want to come on here, give me a call, and we'll get you booked. So we do have other Republicans running. And in this race, it got Brnovich with like 10%, and Lehman 10%, Blake Masters, Michael, that's you.
Yeah,
Mick
Mcguire,
Mcguire. They have you in 4th place, okay, at 4%. Mm-hmm. I'm just being honest.
Yes,
but really,
that's what
I
all
don't
the
know
polls show.
How much this poll means, because the undecided is 58%. Basically, 60% of the people that they ask don't know what they're going to do at this point, and that I find that really fascinating. Do you think that's a pretty accurate poll?
I think that we have polling that shows at the very minimum it's 40% undecided. And that poll has a high number of 58%, but somewhere between 40 and 55% of the electorate is undecided. I think that's accurate. I also think that while many of us that are activists, and you are engaged, you're in the same Republican Women's Club with my wife, Debbie, who is an All-American, and she's our secret weapon, and the daughter of first-generation immigrants from Mexico, I'll add.
Yeah, baby.
She and you and others, you know, that George does a show, you guys follow this stuff. But truthfully, if you take the electorate, about 3 to 5% are what I would call the activist group. They're participating in right to life, the Second Amendment issues. Some may be very active in their legislative districts, and the rest. The balance of the electorate doesn't start looking at this till about 90 days out. Now, we're about 115 days out from the primary. Things are going to really heat up. Mr. Lehman and Mr. Masters have spent quite a bit of money. They have a lot more resources than I do to spend on the radio. But even if we're outspent, we have driven 40,000 miles in 10 months. I'm a fourth-generation Arizonan. I understand that at its core, this state is still cattle growers, cotton farmers, and copper miners. We've done all the work in the rural counties, and we're going to focus on Pima and Maricopa County the rest of the way to build up the numbers and get enough on the air that people learn my name. And I'm confident if this race becomes about character, confidence, leadership, and your resume, I'll win. And I make no apologies for that. There is no more trusted, confident leader in this race than me, including Mark Kelly, but I got to get past the primary. It doesn't mean we don't have great guys in the primary, but we'll win.
Well, General Mick, I had the great opportunity. I sat down when we had one of our meetings, and I got to meet Debbie.
Yeah.
And she's awesome.
She is awesome.
You joined our club, and you also are in our Greater Phoenix Republican Women's Club, which tomorrow night, remember, that's where we're going to be there. We're going to have the Secretary of State Republican candidates as a forum. And you're right about the money. You know, it seems like whenever I watch a lot of political TV, obviously, and I bet you guys see too, Mark Kelly's there all the time.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
he's everywhere. So he is the guy to beat. And so let's say you make the primary.
Yep.
And you are the
nominee. Yep.
How are you going to beat that dude?
Well, I think that's a great question, and I think we need to neutralize the intangibles with him. I said this earlier. Mark Kelly is an astronaut. Mark Kelly is the husband of Gabby Giffords, who's the first lady of the Democratic Party in this state. Unfortunately, she's the victim of a mass shooting. And so what we have to do is realize those are real things. We need to be deferent to that, but also understand that you're running the commanding general of the largest mobilization of the Guard since 1942. Somebody asked me militarily, what's the difference between the two of us? And I said, look, it's not a bad thing to be an astronaut. Those are great things. But we take fighter pilots. We're both fighter pilots, both Service Academy graduates, and we track some of them to do this specialty thing in space. For me, I will tell you there is no more humbling privilege than to be the commanding general of 8,300 of the finest soldiers and airmen out there. And being the commanding general is a whole different cut than anything else you know. And I told them this every time, Alice. I'm no more or less important than any other member of the team. I just have a different set of duties, authorities, and responsibilities. If everyone understands that, even in the body politic, as a United States Senator, I'm no more important than any of the 7 million citizens. Just different responsibilities. That's important.
Well, thank you so much. We're going to end this segment, and we'll be right
back. I'll defend to the death your right to say it.
Welcome back to the Gypsum Salsa Show, here with Don Jorge and Alice, my co-host, and Mr. Martin.
Chistotzin, el primer comediante de los Aztecas. We started that years ago, and it just is so much fun to me to say that.
Still miss
the first
mariachis.
Comedian of Aztec. Yes, we used to do the mariachis thing, which was kind of fun. We had a little musical thing, too, that would just beat... What was it? They would beat a guitar or a drum or something.
That's great.
Yeah.
Remember that?
I do remember that. And Martin has such a great voice, and he could do like the mariachi yell, a grito. You could do a grito, huh?
Oh, the ahua!
Yeah.
That one?
Right on. Yeah.
So... General Mick Mcguire is with us, and I do have a follow-up question, and I appreciate you sharing with us your thoughts on what made you run.
Right.
What was the impetus, the catalyst, the spark, your raison d'être?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then you shared with us a little bit about what makes you different from the other candidates, including Mark Kelly.
Right.
My question is regarding the political side of this, the strategic side. So, for example, we know that during a midterm election, Republicans a vast majority of them are hardcore Republicans.
Right.
They tend to not vote in the midterms, but they really come out for the president, right? In contrast, you've got the Democrats that they're so well organized that they will come out in the midterms. So given that disparity, how do you play your poker hand here?
Well, going through the primary, I tell people that we have to raise an army of voters that say, I pick Mick. So if you go to ipickmick.com, it takes you right to the website, ipickmick.com. Everybody needs to understand that's our rallying cry. And through the primary, we've worked hard in the rural counties, and like I was telling Alice, we're going to now work hard in Pima and Maricopa. But in the general election, we really got to turn out this army of voters. So we have 4-hour-long lines in Safford, in Show Low, in Yuma, as well as all the urban areas, and overwhelm them with Sun Tzu's principle of mass. We really have to be organized. And I tell Alice, she's got to get 10. Martine, you got to get 10. George has got to get 10. If you all do that, we can get the voters out to the polls. But if we take it for granted that someone else is going to do it, I tell them, I live by this faith, family, duty paradigm. Faith, you got to have faith in something greater than yourself. This Easter week, as a Christian, I'm so excited and thankful for Christ's redemptive love. But you got to have faith in something bigger than yourself. And we're not a theocracy. And I tell people, listen, when you serve in our formation in the most ecumenical way, you got to have faith in something. Family. You got to have a core family that holds things together. Because if you don't, it's not a matter of if, but when you have problems. Addiction, misconduct, whatever it might be. But if you have those two together,
yes,
you have a duty to save this republic. You don't have to be in uniform. You participate by voting. You participate by being in Alice's group. You participate by listening to this show. You participate by talking to Martine. He goes out with me and speaks in Spanish and English to get out to all of our citizens of this great state about what we need.
That's right. And let me, if I may, Alice, just as a follow-up, because I believe that we have a responsibility to our God. God gave us this country. I'm leading this statement by going into American exceptionalism.
You bet.
We need to understand that this country has been dedicated and set apart to be the light unto the world.
Correct.
And so knowing that I have to defend myself, protect my community, protect my family, protect my liberties, these are the things that are required of us, as you were saying.
Yep.
There are certain things that we have to do. It's advanced citizenship.
It is.
And we need to be a part of that, not just exercising our right to vote, which is absolutely very important. I'm not discounting that. I'm just saying there's more to this than just the vote. And the fact that if you think about it in those terms, that it's something that you practice and live every day, then that's what's going to make a great country. And that's going to make us more, not susceptible, but inspired to do the right thing in who we choose to represent us in Congress.
Well, and you're right about the civic part of it. Let's say there's, I don't know what the number of listeners is. Let's say there's 1,000 listeners right now. Each of them gets 10. And they, I'm able to earn their trust and confidence as their choice for the U.S. Senate. Their job is to get 10 to the polls. This one show, that's 10,000 votes. You want to know how you get to 2 million plus in the general election? You never take your foot off the gas. And you remind them that you have a duty to save this republic. Your liberties and rights come by the grace of God.
Absolutely
freedom,
right.
Freedom is defined as freedom from tyranny of the government. And look at how many countries have fallen to tyranny of the majority. And the radical left is on the march right now for tyranny of the majority. And going back to Mark Kelly, he's voted 98% of the time with Chuck Schumer. He told you he was going to be an Arizona independent. He hasn't represented anything about Arizona's values. And he voted for an infrastructure bill that didn't have one dime of support for our law enforcement officials at the border or any additional infrastructure there.
Alice?
I want to take you to the border now, mentioning the border. Okay. During the break, and a lot of times we always say, sometimes the show is really hot during the break, then we have to come back. But as we know, we have a problem down at the border.
Yeah.
And I've got a huge concern. So we can campaign really super hard, and I'm still concerned about election integrity, especially with the fact that they're busing these people to New York, where you don't even have to be a citizen now to vote in their city. And it's a lot to combat. Okay, I'm going to use that term, General Mick. How do we fight that? And furthermore, when you get in there, what are you going to do to really go after it?
So the election integrity issue is twofold. First, what I'm going to do at the federal level is stop Nancy Pelosi from any House Bill 1, Senate Bill 1, or H.R. 4, which would pull us back under the Voter Rights Act of 1965, which was an outgrowth of the Civil Rights Act of 64. We were one of 11 states that was under that, where the federal government had to review all of our ballots, our processes, and the rest. 2014, we're free to that, and you can see already they're pivoting back to try to take control. I applaud the House, the state House, for what they've done to now mandatory citizenship proof to vote on a federal ballot. I'd like the federal ballots to be gone away with and only have the same ballots for everybody. Yeah. But, incrementally we're moving in the right direction. Relative to election integrity, Katie Hobbs was with a meeting. She conducted a meeting about cybersecurity in the 2020 election in the summer of 2019. I was the commanding general. I was in the meeting with the county recorders, the attorney general's office, and the governor's office. At the end of an hour-and-a-half meeting, she looked at me and said, "General, you haven't said a word." I said, "Ma'am, never pass up an opportunity to keep my mouth shut." And she said, "What's the most secure election?" I said, "The most secure election is in-person, paper ballot with an ID and a hand count."
Yes, sir.
She said, "This is a cyber meeting." I said, "I'm not deaf." I said, "There's no amount of talking, convincing, or anything you can do that's going to convince people that the machines are more secure than the three of you counting and me adjudicating the final canvas. It's just not. You can't change it. How does your phone know when you start typing the first two letters what you're looking for, right?" That said, I also am pragmatic about the idea that we have to have mandatory ID, and the other thing we have to have in law is mandatory hand counts when we're inside an initial percentage. So you have non-software based machines that scan these ballots just like we did in the 1980s when we did bubble readers. It comes out and it says it's 100 to 92. Well, that's inside 2.5%. Okay, we're going to count it. It comes out 99 to 93, we all agree, and we sign it. That has to happen. If we don't do that, we can't instill confidence in the process. And I tell people, the framers of the Constitution would be aghast at what the media, the radical left media, says. They tell you you can't increase voter participation and increase security. That's a lie. It's offensive to the people that say, "What do you mean I don't know how to get an ID?" And it's offensive to the people that say, "Why can't we increase participation and security at the same time?" It denigrates the intellect of the American people.
Well, it's a big deal with me. We have 1 minute. Okay, let's not forget, give out your website, and if somebody wants to contact you.
Yeah, the website is ipickmick.com or electmick.com. Go there. I need donors. I need volunteers. I need people that want to sign up, that want to help all over the state. It's a statewide race, so every Arizonan all over the state is welcome to be part of the Army that says, "I pick Mick."
And if they're out of state too and they want to help you, they can send you.
Oh yeah, if you're out of state, the U.S. might. Yeah, you got to be a citizen. It's amazing.
That's right. But he's going to represent the whole United States. Okay, we're going to be right back to guac on some more with our candidate, General Mick. I'm Alice Lara with
Martin Gonzalez
and
Don Jorge.
Don't go away. We'll be right back to guac on some more here on the Chips and Salsa Show, Central City Radio, Talk Central Phoenix.
This is the Valley's News Talk. Then you are home. The Valley's News Talk and Podcasts. Talk Central Phoenix.
And now, back to more of the Chips and Salsa Show.
So, which of the Latin countries are you from? The one with the Civil War, the one with the cocaine, or the one with the fancy hats?
We are back. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being part of the Chips and Salsa Show. Your dedication to watching us and being here every Tuesday afternoon.
Woo, gracias, Chipsters.
We love it. Can we just say thank you for helping us grow throughout the years? And thank you for sharing the show with your friends. As you know, to my side, Alice Lara and George Jorge Ortiz El Alacran. And we used to use that name all the time, and I love it. And I know, George, every once in a while you dust off the Alacran, which is scorpion, right? Because he has a sting. He'll get you.
He stings.
So with us, he's a stinger.
A stinger.
And with us is General Mick Mcguire. We have the pleasure of having him in the hot seat, so to speak. And that's actually not even a hot seat because, well, we're all friends right here.
That's
it's not
right.
like this is a debate.
That's
This
right.
is more like a love session.
It's because the show is muy caliente.
I do. So, but what we've been talking about previously, if you've been following the show, is we've been focusing on General Mick, who he is, why he's running, some of the strategies that will help him get to through the primary and then to become a U.S. Senator. And we can talk about other issues, but remember, let's keep in focus that the first thing we have to do is tell our friends and make sure we all vote in August when that opportunity is available to us. General Mick, I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
We're talking about the border a little earlier, and during the break, we talked a little bit about the First Amendment. So the First Amendment is so important,
Yes.
and it's defended by the Second Amendment.
Yes.
You have the left, the really lefties, who are really squashing our ability and our right to say what we believe without being shamed. You know, that's not happening anymore. Anything we say, we're going to be shamed, we're going to be bullied, we're going to be, you know, knocked down. So at what point, General Mick, do we say, do we take up arms, or what is our strategy as a Second Amendment person or as someone who is a pro-gun rights advocate? How do we get to that
let's
point?
make sure that we all know that the Second Amendment is about freedom, and freedom is defined in the Constitution as freedom from the tyranny of the government. Now, you're looking at a guy that was the commanding general of the Guard for the last 8 years of my career. The entirety of the text of the Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, your right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. All of that is centered around the idea of your right to keep and bear arms and the protection of a free state, freedom as defined as from tyranny of the government. Now, we know the radical left is on the march. We know they are. They want control of your children, your thought, your resources, and your gunpowder. George asked a question about what happens with shootings and the rest, and I want to tell people this. Criminal, felonious misconduct with a weapon is unconscionable and needs to be criminally prosecuted, and we need to stand shoulder to shoulder with our law enforcement officers. But those of you that are law-abiding, when someone says to you, why do you need an AR-15, remind them of this. You just did a show with the commanding general of, quote, the well-regulated militia, and in 1903, this country made a deal between the states and the federal government for the federal government to own all the weapons of the National Guard. So in the most pure context, when someone says, well, we don't need those anymore, the National Guard has them, well, then you're ceding total control to the federal government. And George Washington, who was born 86 years before Karl Marx, told us he feared tyranny of the majority more than he feared tyranny of the individual. You want proof of the Lord in Easter week? Explain to me how a guy named George Washington, born 86 years before Karl Marx, said he was afraid of something that he'd never seen in human history.
That's a great question. Let me ask you a follow-up question. Since you were in the position that you were, if you were given, assuming that you were in the position that you were a year and a half ago, and you said that you disobeyed an order and that cost you your career militarily, how do the rank and file of the branches of service, how do they respond when they're asked to do something that they shouldn't do? And specifically, my question is, when the federal government militarizes the National Guard and others against us, your average citizen, to take away our arms.
Well, that is the doomsday scenario that we talk about, and here's what I'll tell you. I've been asked this a lot on the stump. I listed it 92.8. 92% of all of my brothers and sisters in arms totally understand their role and their freedoms and liberties, and the ability to be governed comes by, of, and through the people. That we, the people, consent to be governed, and that they can't be turned. That they can't be turned.
And I appreciate your question. Can I just add here that really, for any of you that haven't picked up the Constitution and specifically the Bill of Rights, please take a moment to read all of them. Know what your rights are under the Bill of Rights. These are amendments to the Constitution. Ergo, they are part of the Constitution. So please read those. You'll be really surprised what you get as a citizen. Alice?
Yeah, and they're God-given rights, too. They're from God. They don't come from man. They come from God. I want to ask you before we run out of time, because of your military background, I also have a concern about our military. You know, the left has been for a long time ago, they started wanting to do experimentation. And our guys and gals work so hard, and I have such respect. And I hate to keep saying fear. I'm going to say concern, okay?
Right.
It's going to be tougher and tougher to keep that strong and top-notch.
Yeah. What I'll tell you, I said 92 to 8. 92% top shelf, full faith and confidence. 8%, maybe plus or minus 1 or 2. What has affected that? This wokeism and the culture of living inside a 50 nautical mile radius of D.C. Hamilton and Jefferson hated each other, but they agreed about 2 things. Greatest threat to the Republic, a large standing army, and oppressive taxation. When you go to vote on November 8th and first on the primary on August 2nd, you name me who you can put on the other side of the dais that can take on both the Department of Defense that trades in 85% public trust and the fact that 23 cents on the dollar you send in next Monday, 23 cents of every dollar will not leave a 50 nautical mile radius of D.C. That is a corrupting influence. That is a recession-proof economy. That is the definition of oppressive taxation. The things that the framers of the Constitution warned us about 240 years ago are still alive and well today. And the fact that Washington predicted this, the radical left moving this way through tyranny of the majority, it's why the filibuster matters. It's why being able to reform and referendum activities in the state of 50+1 is never going to work. It's not how we represent minority populations. Think about it. The minority will never win if it's always 50+1. Always.
And one more question, too, because we're running out of time on that segment. You'll have to come back sometime.
Oh, I'll come back whenever you need me.
Ukraine. Thoughts on Ukraine?
Yeah. First, we can never put people on the ground in Ukraine, but we also have to understand this thing can quickly spill over. We need to provide them humanitarian aid. We need to provide them whatever weapons they need to defend themselves. To think about the Second Amendment, a bunch of guys with 30-06s have ruled the day in Kyiv. But they're in a tough situation in the East and South. I keep saying you can do both things at once. It confuses people. We can arm them and demand de-escalation and ceasefires quickly, because this is a guy that if conventionally he's cornered, the only place he can go is to escalate. I spent 38 years in the military, the first 10 under this umbrella of mutual assured destruction and nuclear warfare, which none of us wants to get into. But the problem is, when you corner somebody and they're irrational and you push them further in the corner, do they behave more rationally? Right? But the problem is Biden isn't leading. Biden is not leading. We need somebody that can use the power of the great country and the world leader to bring him to the table. And he cuts off oil, allows AOC and the squad to scream death to Israel after they bomb Gaza, and abandons Kabul. And people wonder why foreign leaders are emboldened.
And I always like to ask this question of candidates, especially because you have been traveling all across the state. What is the biggest issue that you hear people talking about out there, the voters?
Number one issue that is in all counties is border security. No border, no country. We've got to fix that. Amen. We got to have surveillance of the border, and we got to begin to enforce the rule of law. The border is the touchstone issue this way. If you don't enforce the rule of law at the border, what other rules aren't you going to enforce? And all of our American exceptionalism and upholding the supreme law of the land, the Constitution, goes away if no one enforces the law.
Can you go
General
back and
Mick,
clarify?
we have 1 minute. Okay,
Yeah,
sorry, Martin.
No, I just want to ask you this because you were talking about making sure that people are getting ID'd when they go to vote.
Yes.
Can you go as far to say is that you want to make sure that those people who show IDs are also American citizens?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And remember, just so everybody's clear about the border or the referendum initiatives, there's going to be a voter ID law that the right is advancing. Support that one. There's also one called a free and fair elections by the left. It says that everywhere where it says citizenship in our Constitution, we're going to change it to resident. We don't want that.
We've been interviewing General Mick Mcguire, U.S. Senate candidate in Arizona. I'm Alice Slaughter. You are Martin Gonzalez. This is Mr. Don Jorge. Please be back with us next week, Tuesday, 4 p.m. Everyone have a wonderful Easter. I hope you have a blessed one with you and your family.
God bless you
I'm
all.
Alice.